Germany is taking the lead in European Union discussions on easing sanctions on Syria, a move aimed at delivering critical humanitarian assistance and supporting the country's population as it transitions to a post-Assad era. EU officials, citing foreign ministry sources, are exploring options for targeted sanctions relief in key sectors. However, such a move would require unanimous approval from all member states, a high bar for consensus. The fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime on December 8th came after a rapid and decisive offensive by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an Islamist rebel group. While HTS has officially severed ties with al-Qaeda, it remains classified as a terrorist organization by the United Nations and the United States. The group has since established a caretaker government to oversee Syria's fragile transition. In a related development, the United States announced a 6-month sanctions exemption on Monday, permitting specific transactions with Syrian government entities. This exemption aims to expedite humanitarian aid, address crippling power shortages, and support the flow of personal remittances, lifelines for many Syrian families. Germany's role in shaping the EU's approach to post-Assad Syria gained momentum when Berlin circulated a proposal to Brussels just before Christmas. The proposal outlined a phased easing of sanctions in return for tangible progress on social reforms, including safeguarding the rights of minorities and women, as well as commitments to non-proliferation of weapons. Reports suggest that, much like the US, the EU is considering making any sanctions relief temporary, ensuring that it can be swiftly reversed if the Syrian government fails to meet its commitments. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock and her French counterpart recently made a high-profile visit to Syria, where they met with HTS leader Ahmed al-Sharaa. Baerbock stressed the importance of an inclusive approach to Syria's rebuilding process, urging the involvement of all factions, particularly women and Kurdish representatives, to secure European support for the country's recovery.
A better future for Syria means an inclusive, peaceful transfer of power, reconciliation and reconstruction. This requires a political dialogue involving all ethnic and religious groups, involving men and equally women. They all must be involved in the constitutional process and in a future Syrian government. We encouraged our interlocutors to draw on the UN's experience and support for this political inclusive process.
The EU, along with the United States and Britain, imposed heavy sanctions on Syria after Assad's violent suppression of pro-democracy protests in 2011 spiraled into a devastating civil war. With Assad's departure, there is a renewed focus on reconstruction and addressing the urgent needs of a war-torn population. Meanwhile, Turkish President Erdogan has vowed to protect Syria's territorial integrity and continue combating the PKK. He declared that a new era had begun in Syria following Assad's ousting and warned Turkey would act swiftly against any threats in the region, particularly from Kurdish groups like the YPG, which he views as an extension of the PKK.
The only fate awaiting those who choose terror and violence is to be buried in the ground with their weapons. I am saying this openly. No power can prevent this. Turkey has demonstrated many times its uncompromising will to protect its survival and security. If it comes to that, we can come suddenly one night once again. The circle is closing for the separatist organization and its extensions in Syria.
Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan recently met with Syria's new leader al-Sharaa and called for the lifting of sanctions on Syria, stating it's vital for the country's stability and reconstruction.
The new administration in Syria needs the opportunity and means to implement its promises. The lifting of sanctions against Syria is extremely important for the normalization of Syria and the establishment of security in the country. The necessary preparations for the reconstruction of Syria must be started as soon as possible. Only in this way will it be possible to create an environment that will enable our Syrian brothers to return to their country voluntarily and safely.
While Western nations focus on reconstruction and humanitarian aid, Turkey's security concerns continue to shape the region's future. Ankara remains committed to fighting Kurdish separatism, and this dynamic complicates the efforts of the West to stabilize Syria. The shifting dynamics in Syria have sparked a strategic pivot among Western nations. Germany's push for conditional sanctions relief reflects a growing belief that targeted assistance can stabilize the region while fostering progress in governance and human rights. The current discussions within the EU, coupled with US exemptions, underline a unified Western effort to address Syria's challenges. However, this support remains firmly tied to ensuring meaningful reforms and accountability on the ground. The United Nations has also emphasized the need for unity in rebuilding Syria, urging that all powers, both regional and international, work towards the same goal: rebuilding a new Syria with institutions supported by its people, where all Syrians can recognize themselves.
What we do not want to see is more violence in Syria. It is important that all of the powers in the region and beyond all work towards the same goal, and that is rebuilding a new Syria with institutions that are supported by its people and which all Syrians are able to recognize themselves in.
As Syria enters a new chapter, the coming months will test the international community's resolve to balance humanitarian priorities with long-term stability. The spotlight is on whether Western nations can successfully steer Syria's transition toward lasting peace and equitable governance.